The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, there's a weekly forecast for October 17th through the 21st of 2022. Okay, we'll start off with the pound-yen pair.
Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there was strong long strength confirmed from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, with a breakout and immediate break back in, confirming normal short strength. However, price came right up to that pivot high, where that normal short strength was created, and thus overriding that normal short strength to create strong long strength. And so in the long term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And moreover, on the weekly chart, there was a weak short trade that formed right here and a strong long trade that formed right here. However, I'm waiting for lower time frame confirmation to ultimately decide which is stronger. And so in the short term, I am neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So back in March of this year, there was a weak short trade that formed right here. And then about a month later, there was a strong long trade that formed right here. So the weekly bias was long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit right here a couple weeks later. And then from April to about August, price just ranged around, not creating any new biases until in September. At this point right here, there was a new short trade that formed. And then 2 weeks ago, there was a new long trade that formed. So let's go ahead and measure the strength differential between this short trade against this long trade. Let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that weekly short trade formed right here, and that weekly long trade formed right here. And now in terms of the price elements that are providing short strength for this short trade, well, first of all, we have this legitimate trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now again, it's legitimate because it has more than 3 touches on it. 1, 2, 3, and it came on the 4th touch right here. So that's providing short strength for that short trade. And then moreover, we have these 3 gaps right here that are all providing short strength also. Okay, and you want to remember, gaps are like walls that deflect oncoming price. So if there's a gap right here and price is coming toward it this way, this gap is going to deflect oncoming price and thus creates short strength. Okay, and then moreover, we have this miniature gap right here that's actually providing long strength to this short trade. So we actually have to deduct the long strength of this mini gap right here from the short strength provided by these 3 gaps right here. All right, so let me go ahead and show you the levels for these gaps. Okay, the first gap, the upper level is at 167.73. The lower end is at 167.18. The second gap, upper level, is at 164.43. And the lower end is at 163.48. And the third gap right here is at 159.00. The lower end is at 158.14. And this last mini gap right here, the top end is at 155.78. And the lower end is at 155.55. Okay, so how you want to calculate the short strength for that short trade right here is as follows. Well, first of all, this gap right here is acting as a wall, deflecting that short trade strength, right? And since the size of this miniature gap right here is roughly the same as this one right here, which is providing short strength, well, they pretty much cancel out each other, like so. So what's actually providing short strength are these 2 small gaps right here, plus this legitimate trend line right here. Okay, now let's go over and see what's providing long strength for this long weekly trade. Okay, so first of all, we have this legitimate trend line right here with 1, 2, 3, and the 4th touch, Remember, legitimate trend lines need 3 touches on it. Okay, so this trend line is providing long strength for that weekly long trade right here. And then moreover, we have 5 small gaps right here providing long strength. Let me go ahead and show you the levels for these bottom 3, because these upper 2 gaps, I just told you the levels for those. All right, so this miniature gap right here, the upper level is at 152.80. The lower end is at 152.32. The next gap's upper level is 150.99. The lower level is at 150.67. And this final gap right here, the upper level is at 150.36. And the lower end is at 149.89. Okay, so what's providing long strength for that weekly long trade that formed right here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps, plus this legitimate trend line that runs right through here. Okay, so just going in terms of gaps, there's 5 gaps providing as a wall to deflect price going up, while there's only 2 gaps providing as a wall deflecting price down. So just in terms of gaps, there's more long strength on this long trade than short strength on this short trade. And then moreover, both of these trend lines have 4 touches on it, so they pretty much cancel each other out also. So going strictly from these price elements, there seems to be more long strength for that weekly long trade than short strength for that weekly short trade. Okay, but you want to remember, the lower confirmations always have the ultimate say in terms of these weekly biases. So let's go ahead and see what's happening over there. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, the weekly bias parameters is between this pivot right here and this pivot right here. And judging just by the price elements I just explained to you, it seems like price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that seems to be the case because we got this nice move up last week. However, it did not hit the main target. And moreover, I did not take a long entry, for there hasn't been any lower time frame confirmation for this weekly bias yet. So at the current moment, I'm looking for lower time frame confirmation of strong long strength. And that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now if price come all the way back down to this level right here, break it out and immediately break back in, which creates normal long strength. However, if price could come right back down to this pivot low, overriding this normal long strength to create strong short strength. And furthermore, if we get a nice V-shaped recovery at this point, well, that will further override this strong short strength and create extreme long strength, which will confirm this weekly bias to be long, and I'll be willing to take a long entry. Now that said, there's 2 prerequisites. Now, number 1 is that I need that extreme long strength to form before price reaches its weekly main target at this pivot right here. And secondly, even if we do get this extreme long strength, since the main stop loss level is at this pivot low right here, I'm going to need a nice pullback right down to about the 149 levels for a long entry. Okay, so I'll just have to see what happens with this one, and I'll keep you guys updated. So let's go on to the dollar Swiss pair. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please check out my forecast manual, which is an instruction manual that helps you better understand and get the most out of these forecasts. Okay, and the link is in the details section. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So about 4 months back, we had 3 consecutive monthly rejection candles that formed, which often precedes a long-term short trend. However, that pivot high right here was just reached this week, canceling the possibility of that short long-term trend. And so in the long term, I am neutral biased. And over on the weekly chart, we had a short trade that formed right here and a long trade that formed right here, creating a weekly bias. However, that weekly bias's main target was just hit also this week. And so in the short term, I am also neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So back in April, there was a strong short trade that formed. then a week long trade formed here. So the bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high, and that main target was hit right here. And then in July, we had a strong long trade that formed right here, which was stronger than this short strength created by this short trade right here. And so the bias became long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low right here. And that main target was hit at this point right here. And so at this point, I'm waiting for a new weekly short trade to form, so I could again measure the strength differential between this hypothetical short trade and this last weekly long trade right here to come out with a new weekly bias, whether long or short. Now, since this weekly bias's main target was hit right here this week, and thus the weekly bias is back to neutral, let's just go over what happened on this setup just for educational purposes. So let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so initially what happened was there was a weekly short trade that formed in this area and a weekly long trade that formed in this area. Now, if you recall, going strictly from those higher time frame price elements, this short trade had more short strength than this long trade had in long strength. So if we went strictly from the higher time frame price element, this short trade seems stronger than this long trade. But you want to remember that the lower time frame confirmations have the ultimate say in terms of these higher time frame biases. And so right away, we had lower time frame confirmation of strong long strength from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. So we got a breakout, an immediate break back in, which created normal short strength. However, price came up right away to that pivot high to override this normal short strength, and thus creating strong long strength and actually confirming that weekly bias to be long bias. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Okay, and in the following weeks, we got this nice pullback all the way down to these levels right here, which would have been a nice long entry point for the stop losses at this pivot low right here. But you want to recall, I didn't take this long entry because, like I mentioned on the overview, there was a possibility that a long-term short trend was impending. So what I was waiting for is lower time frame confirmation of short strength to confirm this weekly bias to be short. However, that lower time frame confirmation never came, and price came all the way up to hit its main target this week right here. Okay, so we want to remember, although the price elements were saying that this weekly bias was short, it's always the lower time frame confirmations that have the ultimate say in which way price will go in terms of these biases. Okay, so at this point, I'll be waiting for a new weekly short trade to form so I could again come out with a new weekly bias. All right, so let's go on to the euro dollar. All right, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this price action right here is very strong short and this move still having a ways to go, in the long term, I'm short biased. Right back down to this pivot low right here. And over on the weekly chart, we had a strong long trade that formed right here and a weak short trade that formed right here. However, at the current moment, since lower time frame confirmations is confirming a weekly short bias, in the short term, I am also short biased. Right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. All right, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So back in June, we had a weak short trade that formed. Then 2 weeks later, we had a strong long trade that formed. And so at this point, the weekly bias seemed to be long. And it was also confirmed on the lower time frames. However, current price overrided that weekly bias and made it into short, or in other words, price was now likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And then about a month later, we had another strong long trade that formed right here, which was stronger than this previous short trade right here. And so the bias was long again. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. But again, current price overrided this bias into be short. And simultaneously, last month, a new weak short trade formed right here. And 2 weeks ago, a strong long trade formed right here. Okay, so what you want to remember in terms of the direction that price will go within these biases, there's 3 levels of confirmation. Now that's the price elements on the higher time frames like I showed you earlier, like gaps and trend lines. And then we have the lower time frame confirmations that have more say in terms of the direction of the bias. So in other words, even if the price elements are saying a bias is long, if the lower confirmations are saying it's short, well, the bias is going to be short. Okay, and then we have what happened in these areas right here, where the lower confirmations was saying the bias was long, current price overrided that bias into being short. Okay, so although rare, current price overrides lower confirmations. So once again, if the price elements are saying a bias is long, but the lower confirmations are saying it's short, well then it's short. However, if current price, that means price right now, is showing extremely strong signs of long strength, well that's going to override the lower confirmations and make that bias into long. Okay, and keep in mind that most biases will end at this point right here. And current price overrides normally happen in extreme market conditions, whether long or short. Okay? So again, at this point right here, there was a weak short trade that formed. And 3 weeks ago, there was a strong long trade that formed. And I already explained to you the price elements that are providing short strength and long strength. So please check that out on a weekly forecast from a couple weeks back. Okay, so in terms of price elements, it seems this bias is long. So let's go and see what's happening on the lower time frame confirmations. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. All right, so on this 4-hour chart, that weekly short trade formed here, and that long trade formed in this area right here. Now right away, we had lower time frame confirmation of strong short strength. From this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here, see we got a break out, immediate break back in, confirming normal long strength. However, price came right back down to override that normal long strength to create strong short strength, and thus confirming that weekly bias to be short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. Okay, so at this point, if there's no further confirmation of strong long strength, and we get a pullback right back to these 1.0100 levels around here, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high and its main target at this pivot low. Okay, and I'll keep you guys updated with this one also.
Okay, that's it for the weekly forecast, and just a heads up, remember to download the forecast manual in the details section. The manual explains the basic outline of how I trade, the major components of my strategy, as well as an explanation of price action jargon. I suggest keeping the PDF open while you watch the forecast, and if there's something you don't understand in the forecast, pause the videos and look it up in the manual. Because my actual strategy is not that complicated, but since price action trading is such a relatively unknown way of trading, I'm sure most people are unfamiliar with the price action jargon that I use. But again, the strategy is rather simple as long as you understand the terms that I use and the basic outline of the strategy. Okay, but if you still don't understand what I'm talking about in these forecasts, don't hesitate to ask me questions in the comments section or ask me on Discord and we could talk one-on-one. Okay? Okay, so I hope you guys have a great week, guys, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.